What's going on, my fellow basketball sickos? If you were anything like me, you were shocked by the way the Timberwolves absolutely obliterated the Phoenix Suns in this first round matchup. They dominated the Suns in every single aspect of the game, and this series was not even close. So going in, I have to admit that I thought this was going to be a grind of a series for both teams, but after reflecting on it, it is clear that the Suns never really had a chance in this series because the playoffs are the ultimate truth teller. The playoffs tell the world exactly what every team is capable of, and the truth that came out for the Suns is that their roster is not constructed in a way where they can compete on this level. So I knew the Suns had tons of issues going into this series with their team, but I thought that the sheer shot-making ability of Kevin Durant and his greatness, along with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, would be enough to keep them in these games and keep them in the series and lead them to a couple victories. So let's start there. In Game 1, KD showed up and did his thing, but Bradley Beal and Devin Booker were nowhere to be found. In Game 2, none of the big three showed up, and, well, that's a disaster waiting to happen. In Game 3, they finally all played decent and were all in the 20s, and they still lost. And then in Game 4, Devin Booker had a super efficient 49, Kevin Durant added an efficient 33, so they combined for 82 points, and then Bradley Beal only gives them 9. But still, you have 91 points combined with the three of them, and, well, they still lost. So after that simple recap of the Big Three's performance in all 4 games, it is evident that they did not play near the level that I thought they would play at, and I'm sure that most of you thought they would play at. And ultimately, that's the biggest reason why they lost this series. The Big Three did not perform well at all, but it was not entirely their fault. With the way the roster had to be constructed because of the money that those 3 players make, they were unable to put players around them and fill the gaps that needed to be filled with this team. So the one key factor and the biggest problem that was exposed in this series was their lack of a point guard. The Wolves were applying 94 feet pressure, and it completely wore down the Suns physically, mentally, and it never really allowed them to get in any sort of rhythm on the offensive end because they were having to work super hard to get it across half court. And it even got to the point where the Suns were having to use multiple screens in the backcourt to free open the person that was bringing the ball up, whether it was Bradley Beal or Devin Booker or Kevin Durant. And then there was also a lot of times where those players would simply dump it off to one of the players that wasn't getting pressured full court to relieve some of that pressure and let them bring it up. This created more issues because when they finally did get it across half court, they were at 16, 17 seconds on the shot clock, and now they were being rushed into their offense where not only the ball handler was still being pressured, but the people off ball were also being hounded and being forced out away from the basket and forced away from their spots. And this just created a lot of problems for the Suns offense, and it all goes back to not having a point guard. As I've said before, handling the ball and handling the ball as a point guard is 2 entirely different things that is kind of hard to explain in words. So luckily for me, the Timberwolves did that for me, and they showed the world what it looks like when you don't have a true point guard to bring the ball up and to get you into your offense. And while Frank Vogel did not help this issue with creative set designs and plays that could get his guys in the right spots, he was also limited because of the surrounding pieces and because of the Wolves' pressure just was too much for his team. And no matter what you draw up as a coach, if your guys cannot handle the physicality, you're in trouble, and that's exactly what happened. Beyond the need for a point guard, the Suns got physically dominated on both ends of the floor, whether it was on defense, whether it was on the glass, whether it was protecting the paint, whether it was scoring in the paint. They got dominated all over the floor physically. They lacked the athleticism, the size, the mentality, and just the strength to really compete with this Wolves team. And again, that was an issue for the Suns that was really exposed in this series. And then lastly, the injury to Grayson Allen was the nail in the coffin for the Suns team. Outside of him, this roster does not have much shooting, which means that the Wolves could really load up on the Big Three and be boxes and elbows and make it hard for them to even get shots up, much less quality shots. And that is exactly what they did. They loaded up. They dared Eric Gordon. They dared Royce O'Neal and whoever else came in the game for the Suns. They dared them to beat them. And obviously you have Nurkic, who was not a floor spacer, so Gobert was able to just sit in the paint and protect the paint and do what he does best. So it may not seem like much, but Grayson Allen was one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA, and the Wolves would not have felt as comfortable leaving him wide open as they did with some of the other role players on the Suns. So losing Grayson Allen meant that there was one less person on the floor that the Wolves had to focus on, and the Wolves had to extend their defense to guard. So the poor performance of KD, Booker, and Beal, combined with the lack of a point guard, the inability to match the physicality, and the limited amount of shooting on this roster outside of the big three was a horrible combination that ultimately led to this sweep. So the Suns have some serious internal issues and some questions that they have to look at this offseason, from the coach to the big three, down to the role players, down to all the way to the 15th man on the roster. But unfortunately, they do not have much flexibility to fix these things and many options to look at, and they may have to seriously look at blowing this thing up and just chalking it off as a failed experiment, because I don't know how you run this back with knowing that there is no room for improvement on this roster, the way it's constructed and the way the money works and the way the new CBA is going to go into effect next year. And also knowing that you just got swept by the Timberwolves, who were not going to get any worse next year, barring some kind of major trade or major injury or major blow up. And they may not even be the best team in the Western Conference. We'll see what they look like against the Nuggets and beyond that if they're able to make it that far. But you just got swept by a team that may not even be the best team in your conference. So how do you run this back and expect the results to be any different next season? Thanks for checking out the channel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out some more of our content.